Let's expand on this conversation, bringing in violence monitor and UKZN researcher Mary De Haas. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Perhaps let's start off right at the beginning. We know that South Africa, at the time, at the peak of COVID-19, had some of the world's toughest restrictions, which saw over 340,000 people, with criminal records today, convicted for either not wearing a mask or not abiding by curfews. The ripple effect has, of course, been detrimental.
Oh yes, look, I'm also part of a medical rights group, and we monitored the whole COVID thing very closely. Just a few of us, mostly medical people, and I used to teach medical students. I'm a social scientist. Now, what happened during COVID must never be allowed to happen before. The restrictions were crazy. I mean, the whole world. Look, I've read a lot of stuff, and the restrictions did more damage than COVID did, I think. This is just in Europe and America and places like that, and the forcing people to have vaccinations, has been shown to be a disaster. But that's another issue, the whole question of we must never allow this to happen again. Now, the restrictions were completely irrational. You had the crazy thing is, if you think back, you weren't allowed out on the street. You brought the army in, and yet in July 21, nothing was done to stop looting. So you see how absolutely crazy it is that you went to all this trouble. You had people not allowed to walk their dogs on the street without fear of being arrested. And as for the alcohol restrictions, it was common knowledge that in a lot of areas, the informal sector was going on. It involved politicians, it involved police. So to punish people for things like and masks themselves remain extremely contentious about whether they actually were necessary or not. It was really a matter of preference rather than the proven benefit.
Yeah.
So, of course, those records must be expunged. There's just no sense in having criminal records for being out on the street, wearing a mask, having alcohol, when, as I said, the records at the time I got was that especially in rural areas or badly policed areas, life carried on. People were just, selling alcohol during the prohibition when we couldn't buy it legally. In fact, maybe that's why there was a prohibition, so that people could make money out of, especially politicians or police, making money out of selling it. So I just want to say very emphatically, those records should not exist. They must be expunged.
Well, the expungement process is essentially free. Applicants require a police clearance certificate. That in itself doesn't come for free. It costs about 170 Rand, which some of these people don't necessarily have. That in itself becomes even more problematic.
Yeah, that is, that just reminds me that years ago, I think one needs to look at the whole question of police clearance certificates, because there should be a database with that. And I can remember years ago a story about, if you wanted to be a security guard, you have to have a clearance, criminal record clearance. Now, and this was, I haven't looked at it for years, but this is what I heard at the time because I was on the Sierra board, that actually the whole process of getting the clearance had been privatized to a relative of a politician. So I think you need to look at why it should cost that much. Please look at that. Why does it cost so much? This should be on a database. Surely there's a database of people who are convicted and have criminal records. What's the use of having artificial intelligence if you can't have something like a very straightforward database? You get convicted for a crime and you're entered into a database. So why does it cost that money? It should be part of, that needs investigation, quite frankly, because you're quite right. People don't have 170 Rand to spend. They need it for food or water, for that matter.
What about the conversation around stigmatizing those who come into conflict with the law and the kind of ripple effects that has on, for one, the economy and society, and of course, the gap, the window of reoffending. What are your thoughts around that?
Look, I mean, it depends on the offence. You can't compare this, what happened during COVID, where you got arrested if you walked your dog or if you were on the beach, or, you know, you got the army in, people got killed by the deployment of the army. You can't compare that with what happened in July 21. And the criminal records for somebody who's raped, who's convicted of rape or raped a child or has tried to kill someone. I mean, they're just, you know, it's like what we say, chalk and cheese. So, I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, just because you've got a criminal record, is it for stealing a loaf of bread or, you know, is it for disobeying COVID regulations? It's not the same as threatening someone with a gun, having an illegal gun, trying to kill someone, or actually killing someone. It's just so different. So you've got to distinguish between what's on the criminal record. And it shouldn't be difficult if we just had a proper database of, you know, what crimes these people were convicted of. I mean, I just hope somebody will look at that. Nobody should have to pay 170 rand to get a clearance for a petty crime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. We're going to have to leave it there. Speaking there to Violence Monitor and UKZN researcher Mary De Haas, of course, speaking about some of the measures that are being put in place around the expungement process for those who were on the wrong side of the law during the COVID-19 pandemic.